Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the podcast, Smart Man, Smarter Woman, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And thank you very much for giving us a listen today. I am Steve Lotes.
And I am Juliet Aurora.
And we are your co-hosts. And before we bring in today's special guest, let's hear a few words from my wonderful co-host, that smarter woman herself. Juliet, how are you doing today?
I am excellent. Thank you, Steve, so much for asking. By the time this podcast airs, it'll probably be public already. So I can share why I'm excellent is that our house was sold this week. Day before yesterday, actually, it was sold. Very stressful process. Been a long time since I sold a house. Forgot how stressful it was. So glad that it was such a short time frame. But more than that, I'm excited about our next adventure. That now the house is sold, we're thinking of moving to the East Coast. We don't have a house yet, at least at the time of this recording. We don't have a new house. So I'm a little worried we may be homeless, but other than that, I guess I'm excited that being an entrepreneur has given me this opportunity to pick up and move my life and my business, because it's virtual, doesn't even need to move, and basically live out, where I wanted to live out my retirement long before I'm retiring. So I'm excellent.
Well, thank you, Juliet. You sounded most extremely excellent. I don't know if that's a correct words or correct use of the English language, but that's exactly how you sounded. And the homeless part, would that not be part of the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, probably. It might take me back to places I don't necessarily want to remember in my entrepreneurial journey, but yes, absolutely. It's probably correlates in there well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. We shouldn't make light of that because we don't want to experience that. Anyway, that's enough of that. This audience does not want to hear from us. They want to hear from our guest. And our guest today is Brady Dahmer, and Brady joins us all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia. Beautiful Vancouver. And how are you doing today, Brady?
Awesome, Steve. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. And morning, Juliet. How are you guys doing?
We are fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So before we start getting into this, why don't we begin, Brady, if you could perhaps just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you help people, a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So my entrepreneurial journey, actually, one of the things I was kind of listening about, you guys inspired me today because I was listening through some of your old podcasts and I was like, you know what? I think my entrepreneurial journey starts back when I was actually a kid, because some of the speakers you guys have on had inspired me to kind of look back even further. And I think my entrepreneurial journey started when I was really, really, really super young. I sort of grew up on a farm and my grandfather was a farmer. And I think his veracity to kind of, to run a farm and be a part of the community was a blueprint or a foundation for me to become this entrepreneur. Like he was this, hardworking, cattle farmer that, sold beef from his farm. So he always had people coming and going. He was the guy that sold all the feed to the local farmers. And he was also the local mailman. So he was a hustler. He had the hustle going on long before. And I think that for me was a really great sort of view into kind of what it took, but also what you could get from it. And also the reciprocity within the community as well. So because I thought of just how well he was, respected in his community. Like we would do these massive sort of community gatherings, a couple times a year. And it was so great to see, everybody kind of come together. And that for me, I think was the very first sort of introduction to my entrepreneurial journey as I kind of thought about it. And throughout the years, my parents were incredibly supportive of this as well. My mom being an artist and my dad being a mechanic and a constant tinkerer. That also, I think, really, really helped with, me with the both sides of my brain, that being the creative side and also to the engineering, how it's made kind of side. So for me, I started with design. So my business is all around branding, design, and communications. I went to college for that, moved to Toronto, worked at the agency world for many years. But me being an entrepreneur and kind of also too loving my own thing, I did a lot of side projects, and my boss, knowing I did a lot of side projects, got me involved in even more, which when I started sitting on boards for large sort of like Toronto Film Festival was one of the bigger boards I sat on. And I was this young little kid that was, in his early 30s working on some of these larger boards just because I was so interested in wanting to learn. And that really was one of the things I always enjoyed and loved and the passion of what I did. So I just threw myself into anything and everything, and I never said no. And I think that's one of those key things as an entrepreneur. You kind of have to have that no filter at the very beginning, just to kind of start learning and understanding where the boundaries are and everything else. So for me, I just said yes to everything. And then as I kind of grew, I threw myself into other positions and other jobs in around the design and branding and marketing sort of field, did website design and a bunch of those things. The bubble burst, and the company I was working at was on a downward slope. And at that point, I decided to jump out onto my own. And one of the things I asked, and I guess I'm not really sure where I learned this, but I asked all of my friends and my relatives and, everybody that I knew to say, can I be an entrepreneur? Like, can I run a company myself? At which point everybody rolled their eyes and just basically laughed and said, you've been doing this for however long. You've got a network now of people, like you've got all the key ingredients. But one of the things I really wanted to do is learn from my mentors and from other people that I knew and ask them their opinions of certain things. And I'm not really sure where I learned that, but that's also one of the things that kind of followed me around is that I have coaching and mentorship. And before I make any big decisions, I sort of go in and I try to be as honest as open as possible and look for that feedback. And so I asked them, everybody kind of laughed at me and they're like, you're kind of born and made for this. So go and do it. My mom was probably the scared of anybody because, generationally, there's very few entrepreneurs out there and it was always tough for them. So my mom was probably the most worried out of anybody because, how is her son going to survive, going out on his own and being an entrepreneur. But I thrived in that. And 15 years later, I'm still running an agency, still doing what I love. My journey's taken me right through from Toronto, moved to Vancouver 15 years ago, ran an agency here. But, I still had that entrepreneurial spirit that as much as I love doing the agency work, I also very passionate about so many other things. And everything from I wanted to write a book. And because I had an idea that, us as designers, as people who create, especially things for clients, we produce only a very small portion of our work ever really gets seen. So I decided that I wanted to write a book about all the unseen creative talent that's been untapped. And I started creative fashion. The book was, I approached a few publishers. The publishers said no, but I decided that it was still a really great idea and understood that, there's still great creatives out there with work that's unseen, and the people that get the most unseen stuff are usually photographers. So I created an entire fundraising photography exhibit called Not Fit for Print, which was a collection of the best unseen fashion photography from across Canada that raised money for any kind of, one out here was called Dress for Success. I did another one in Toronto, but any sort of charity that would help people get to the next step in life or help them from one place to another in dressing them and helping them with coaching and things like that. And then I realized for me to scale it would take an immense amount of energy and everything else. And so I left that alone. I did that for about a year and a half, did 3 exhibits. Such a great success. I love doing it. But again, too, I also realized looking ahead, understanding what it would take to get it to the next step and everything else. It was, I kind of had to leave that there, but not to be undone my next project. And this is all while I'm running the agency as well, as I decided to run a sort of film festival with a partner. And it was about 10 years ago. And it was just when TED was becoming just starting to become a thing. And also too, the environmental movement was out there. And I realized that there wasn't enough sort of platforms for people to watch some really great social environmental films. And this is long before Netflix or anything else kind of came out as well. And so for 7 years, I ran basically a film festival. It was a speaker and film and speaker dialogue series where we brought in speakers and films from around the world dealing with social and environmental issues. So kind of like the TED format, what we would do is we brought in film dealing with a specific subject, and we'd find a local expert on that subject. And we'd create a dialogue within the theater where the person would basically say, here's a film that maybe takes place in another country, another city, but here's what's happening in our local city. So a huge success. But again, as the entrepreneurial journey goes, you have certain barriers and certain things that you know that once you hit a certain step, that to scale or to do anything else, or maybe sometimes it's just run its course. And I think in our case too, we were battling against the couch. We were battling against, TEDx, in the way that people can now receive, we fast forward to this time where anything's accessible by all these platforms that we can get on our TVs. So trying to get people out of their houses. And then also to the proliferation of all the TED and TEDx's. So there was so much more content and things around that we realized that it was really tough to earn those bums and seats. So that was a big learning thing too, is knowing when to kind of shut that down. So where our input wasn't getting the right output that we kind of wanted. And we had to be very sort of open to seeing what was going on in the industry and being very aware of it, and kind of, unfortunately, giving up one of these passion projects that we have and we love doing, because it just, what we're doing was just was so much fun and so interesting, and watching how people were engaged was fantastic. So, and then also too, like you said, Steve, like being an entrepreneur and still having this passion of like growing. And I think with the film festival, I loved how I could change and help people. And that's always been, a big passion of mine. I still sit on a lot of boards using my learnings, in marketing and branding to help those boards and everybody else really get to where they want and help the most people that they possibly can. I was going to say, I've been happily peer pressured and inspired to write a book for my clients and coworkers that focuses on our industry. And I think a bigger thing that's kind of been happening in our industry, titled, I Wish I Knew That Before We Started. And it's basically a project handbook for any small business owner, for any startup who is working with freelance designers or agencies. And essentially, it's a collection of things not to do on a project. So it is a step-by-step sort of guide to help people understand that there is a knowledge gap between what sort of the new creative, what creatives know, what freelancers don't, like what they know in their specific fields, right through to, the clients as well. And I think especially with COVID and a lot of the society the way we are right now, I think one of the issues that because of all the layoffs and things like that, there's a lot of consultants that are out there. There's a lot of people who've kind of left their job and are going on, they're becoming consultants and helping other clients. But the problem is that a lot of times with these consultants, that there was project managers and a team between them and a client to kind of manage and help guide the project to success. And this is that space where this handbook kind of fits in, is that between someone who knows, an extreme sort of amount of, or it can really, they really know their specific skills and talents on one side, and then the client on the other side who's just looking for a really great result, but also a process that's going to help them get to that goal as well. So that is my long journey of, everything from the farm right through to now getting a book and writing it. So yeah.
Nobody could ever accuse that journey of being boring. That's for sure. And there was a couple of things. I guess the first thing that came into my mind as you were speaking was, because this seems to be such a common trait amongst so many entrepreneurs, when you said, say yes to everything. And then, I think, how many entrepreneurs out there and are still doing it, is fake it till you make it, right? Like, just you keep saying yes, whether you know how to do it or you don't know how to do it. You just keep saying yes. And at some point, you will make it if you just keep saying yes and faking it. So I thought that was awesome. But you also, I got to tell you, you gave me a bit of a flashback there to something I hadn't thought about for a long time. And you were talking about your mom and how she was nervous when you were starting this entrepreneurial journey. Mm-hmm. And I had this flashback. I remember when I started my very first business. My very first business, I was in retail, and I graduated from college. I had a degree in electronics, and I can remember the very first time my mom came to visit me at the retail store. And I can remember her looking around and going, yeah, this is really great. And you know that what's really great is you got your degree from college, so you can get a real job if this doesn't work out. And I had never thought about that again until you said that. And honestly, my mom was incredibly supportive of everything I did. But I just remember that one conversation. Like you say, it's a generational thing. That, I was supposed to go out and work in that big corporate world because that was going to be the safe thing for her child to do. Wow, that came back to me so real. I can't believe it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For that.
So I would like to touch on something that you did not mention in your journey.
Okay.
Only because I thought it was so interesting and would generate an interesting conversation or at least a question I had. That we read that you had started an entrepreneurship course for high school students.
Yes.
Which we feel is, Steve and I feel very strongly, it should be taught in the high schools, it should be taught in the schools, because nothing in the education system prepares you to be an entrepreneur. And so love that this is something that you launched. And was it in Vancouver that you did it, or was it when you were in Ontario?
We will continue with our conversation right after this message from a friend of the show. AIS Solutions is an award-winning cloud accounting firm serving small business all across Canada. If you want to migrate to a powerful and effective paperless accounting system and get your financials wherever you are, whenever you want them, then contact AIS Solutions team of trained professionals today at www.aissolutions.ca. And now, back to our conversation.
No, well, it was something that I was a part of, and it is part. Well, we launched the Vancouver chapter of this. So there's a few. It's an organization called TIE, and TIE is an international, global, an Indo entrepreneurial sort of network. So every city kind of has like it's the founding sort of group is called TIE, and it was for sort of East Asians and Indonesians across the globe to kind of find their network and find the people within that. It was kind of like a business organization for them to find, their peers and everybody else that they could help each other within each one of those cities. So, and then from there, they realized that they wanted to help educate the next generation of entrepreneurs. And through that, they created a program called TYE, so the Youth Entrepreneur Program. And it is a global competition where it's a multi-month kind of sort of course where each week another entrepreneur from the community comes in and talks to the students about their specific skills and talents, everything from accountants to marketing people to business coaches. And at the end, all the high school students in that class, they're broken into groups, and each one of the groups comes up with a business idea. That business idea, they have to write up the financials, the business plan, the marketing, do, prototypes if they can. And then at the very end, they actually are in a sort of they have to present these ideas to a panel, and the panel gets to pick which one of these ideas is the best, has the most kind of product or sort of like fit within it's go to market, so can win on that way. And then from there, they actually each one of the chapters pre-COVID, they would go down to an international competition, and each one of the students would go and compete. And it wasn't so much even about the how great the idea was, but it was the presentation skills, the how deep the business plan went into everything, all their market and research and things that they did within that. So there was a lot of different things, not just the viability of the product, but everything around it. So I'm very happy to say the first 5 years that I was part of it at the Vancouver chapter 1-3. Our very first 2 years that we were in this competition amongst, dozens, I think it was up to over 30 other chapters from North America competed. And Vancouver won the first 2 years it competed, and then it won the fourth year. So it was awesome. And then so I was a mentor, and then I started to run everything after that. So I guess
the question I wanted to ask you around it was, what have you found based on the students that you worked with, and obviously the entrepreneurs, yourself and your clients? What are the correlations that you have found that at a very young age, you can see something in an entrepreneur or in a student that you think will set them up for success?
Great question. I think the setting up for success is actually it's going to go into two streams. One being a lot of people who think they want to be an entrepreneur realize that what they really love are those specific things that, in the business itself. So you have the people that really all of a sudden love the fact that they can be an entrepreneur and they can do all of these things, and they feel they know what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And all of a sudden you see the other channel too, where people love the idea of being a part of a business and a startup, but don't really necessarily want to be an entrepreneur, where it might have seemed like a really great idea at the beginning of coming up with a business, but they also see the energy, the work, and the effort that goes into being an entrepreneur, at which point they realize, like, I just really love my specific talent and what I can bring to a company. And maybe it's a startup, or maybe it's something, an earlier, a smaller business that I can help in that way. Whereas, so you have those people who all of a sudden see what it takes to build a company and be an entrepreneur, and you can just see the fire in their eyes. So from that, I think that was the biggest thing we kind of learned or the students kind of learned from going out, is understanding themselves better about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And that's kind of one of the greatest things, because we've all seen those people who we know have incredible talents and skills in one area, but it's to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have you've got to have that persistence, you got to have those multi skills and be able to kind of get through a lot of different things. So that's kind of, I think, the greatest thing we kind of offered a lot of these students, who, save them a lot of pain and suffering in the future if they not, undue stress and everything else in the future based on that. So thinking it's one thing, but realizing it's another.
Yeah. And I mean, we Juliet and I talk about that all the time, that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It does take a special kind of breed. And I would like to come back a little bit to your handbook. I love the title of it, but that's also, I ask that question a lot of our guests. And perhaps if you wouldn't mind, and again, for our audience, the name of the handbook, I wish I knew that before we started. And I think we can all relate to that sentence. Maybe if you could share perhaps a couple of things maybe around marketing that, you wish you had known before you started that would have been helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Well, this is really a collection of our sort of the wins, and also too, like I said, the failures that we've had, and also the failures that we've kind of heard our clients go through as well. So some of the stories is that one of the stories that we kind of had was one of our clients hired, use an online service, 99 Designs or Fiverr, any of the tools that are kind of online. And one of the things that they did when they hired, they had a logo done. And this was a larger company, and they just didn't see the budget for needing someone to do this, this important logo for them, like an agency. So they hired somebody online, thinking they save a few dollars here and there. And literally a day before they were going to launch, this sort of the separate product and a bunch of other things, someone decided to go online and see if there was, just do an image search. They'd heard about something online. And so they did an image search using their logo and realized that the logo that they were about to launch, their entire new product and everything else, was an exact duplicate with just a different name on it. And at which point they realized that they could never trademark this. They could never copyright it. There was nothing they could do because they didn't properly really own the logo. It wasn't part of, they couldn't use it in the way they wanted it to. So they've just spent all that time, energy, and effort producing, just a logo, all the business cards and a bunch of other things, the website, all that stuff with the logo and branding on it, that now they realize all that time, money, and energy had gone to waste because they just didn't know the proper steps to go through when hiring the right people or the right questions to ask. Another one of my clients about a month ago realized that she didn't own the creative rights to the illustrations that an illustrator did for her. And so he created some gorgeous, she teaches meditation. She does meditation. She's basically a success coach. And so she wrote a book, and she hired this illustrator to do these gorgeous, beautiful illustrations all about meditation and everything else. But she didn't realize that she didn't own her illustrations that were in the book. And so needless to say, she found out that he was using these illustrations on pillows, on posters, and a bunch of other things. So again, it kind of just ate away at her brand and everything else. So I think a lot of people don't realize those sort of key important sort of gaps, within a project, timelines, budgets, all those things that could affect or not affect, the success of a project. And like I said, it's those small things. It's those little details that, end up sometimes being those big problems, those little stones that being, the big sort of, grinding kind of annoyance in our shoes that we don't know about. So over the years, and I've kind of interviewed my clients and other designers and other people in the industry, being like, what have been the big blind spots that people, you think they've kind of seen or understand, but once you get deep into a project that they have no idea about, or they don't realize certain things. So this is a collection of all of those kind of things, those blind spots, those things that you would think that the other person, that being the creative or the client, would know, but they just don't. So I kind of simplified it a lot so that any small business owner, any small sort of startup, it's written in a way that is just really super helpful for them, and it doesn't go too far into it, but it helps them ask those specific questions based on what kind of project that they have, so that they know going in, they're ahead at every step. Yeah. They know, eyes wide open, going in and understanding exactly where those risks are and where the opportunities lie as well. So that's kind of what it's written for.
So we're always trying to make sure that every episode of the podcast, gives an action item for our audience. So if we go with your scenario, which is just horrible, that this woman wrote a book, had it illustrated, and the illustrations didn't belong to her. What is the solution for that for our audience so that doesn't happen to them? Is it, a clause that needs to be in the contract that they need to look for, or some wording? How can they? Let's make this an action item for them so that they don't encounter that.
Love the question, and this is a really, really, really big thing for a lot of companies, because I don't think a lot of people who hire designers or any creatives in general. So everything from anybody that does branding, any logos, brochures, videos, photos, anything that you're hiring somebody to create for you is owned by them, by what's called creative ownership. And it is, what a lot of people don't know, is it's actually protected by law by the creator. So it is that creator's intellectual property until the creator gives the company that creative ownership. And this also includes all of the revision, all of the graphic assets, all the concepts, all of those things. So an action item to help companies get around this is creating something as simple as like a creative transfer agreement. And they can search it up online, but it doesn't have to be long, but it helps protect the small business owner and creatives in around what the exchange is, on the contract side, so they can look it up online. I'm actually right in the middle of writing a very simplified one. At the time of this, you can put this in the show notes as well, but I'll send you guys a link to where someone can download a sample version of this.
Great.
And it's just a one-page thing, just saying that everything that's been produced and that's been paid for has been properly transferred from the creator to the small business and company. And that's a really great way. So it's not a big legal contract. It can be very simple, but it protects the small business and the creator from anything that comes up. Because I've also heard stories where a company will go back and asking for their logo or their brochure or everything else, and the creator will be like, you have to pay me again for that. And it becomes a very big issue and a very complicated issue. Lawyers get brought in because, the company, it's just at that point, the creator can really ask for anything that they want. So they're really, the small business and can really be, held over a ledge on this, because it's just something that, if not discussed, and not to scare people, but this is sort of like, it's a very gray subject in a lot of contracts, and no one really thinks about it. And everybody kind of believes that there is a belief, like once you pay for something like a logo, that it is yours, but it is not by law, that it is yours. And it's once you're just paying for that one use of that logo, or whatever that creative piece is.
Yeah,
if not described it there.
Absolutely. I would assume that if I paid somebody to draw something for me, or illustrate something for me, or create something for me, that it belongs to me because I paid them to do it. it would never occur to me that it still belongs to them. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure our audience will be going back and looking at their contracts to see whether they own their logo or not.
Well, and
I would highly say that there's probably a good chance that 99.9% of the people that have ever had anything done by a creative person does not own outright their creative or what they paid for. And it is by law still the ownership still belongs to the person who's created it. So, and this is just something, it doesn't have to be brought up. Like a lot of creators are just very sort of fluid with giving clients their things, but still having them understand it's still owned by them. So that's kind of like, I wish I knew that before I started. Yeah. One of the big things that come up. So
that's great advice, because you're absolutely right. And just exactly what Juliet said, right? That there is an assumption of those who don't know better, that if I paid somebody for that, that is now mine.
Yes.
But that's great. I will come back a little bit later as to how people can get your handbook. But that brings us to the part of the show that we love to call the Smart Man, Smarter Woman version of James Lipton's Actor Studio, where we ask every one of our guests 6 questions, the same 6 questions. And if you are ready to be on the hot seat, Brady, I can get started.
Absolutely. Bring them on.
Perfect. What one word best defines an entrepreneur?
Passion.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Pilot.
Okay. What profession would you like never to attempt?
Oh, I don't think there isn't one, but accountant would probably be close to anything dealing with numbers and charts for me would be off the list, actually. Yes.
Perfect. What sound or noise do you love?
Cha-ching.
You're the first to give that answer. That's a good answer. What book would you recommend every entrepreneur should read?
Oh boy. I've read one. Oh my God. I'm a voracious reader, and this is actually, I do have one. I have a few. One is, and I think this is just bringing on that passion, is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. That's been an incredibly inspiring. It just, when I'm having a bad day, the way he talks, the way that he gets things done is phenomenal. And that's something that's really been inspiring for me. And then there's another book by an author by Jocko Willink. And it's all about, I don't know the title of it, but it's about being disciplined. And that one is phenomenal. It just gets me set in it takes the entrepreneurial, the very sometimes chaotic, very sort of creative, the explosive mind of the entrepreneur, and helps focus it into a very specific stream of action. So for me, the Jocko Willink book about discipline is amazing. And honestly, just about the grind is really Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And it just, it resets my brain in a way that I can be, I understand what other people have gone through, and it's like life isn't as tough. So those two have been kind of two big ones for me.
Okay, good recommendations. And our last question here: when your own entrepreneurial journey is completed, what do you hope your legacy is?
I hope my legacy is that I've been able to help a lot of people, actually, just connect and affect a lot of people, and just bring joy and happiness into their life, reduce their stress, and make their lives a little happier, bring a smile to their face. So that's kind of that they've been happy that I've been a part of their life.
Awesome. And for those in our audience who would like to connect with you, Brady, what is the best way for them to do that?
Email and LinkedIn are two of the key ones for me. So, and also too, we have an Instagram that people can be inspired by, and I'm going to be putting up tips and things like that. But usually LinkedIn and email are the two easiest ways to do so.
And we will have your email and a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so people can find them there. And before we conclude, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share with our audience of entrepreneurs, Brady?
I don't today, but I love you all. And it's one of those things where get out there and get going. And one of the things maybe that I've learned in the last year too is being an entrepreneur is, as lonely as it can be, just also to make sure that you're finding ways to connect and be inspired. And that, it's, if you're having a hard day, just call someone, just say hi and just sort of reconnect. Because I think partly, in this time and place that we're in, and also to being entrepreneurs, I think sometimes we feel very lonely in what we do. And I would just say, find your people, make some calls, be connected, and, just stay passionate about what you do. And I guess one last thing too is be good to yourself, rest and take a day off every now and again, and just be good to yourself, let your mind go. Because that, for me, I did that last week because I was getting very stressed and very sort of like very overwhelmed by everything. But what I realized that I had not taken a proper break in a couple of days, and actually not even a couple of days, probably like a month and a half, and back to back to back. And we need that as well for ourselves and to recharge and everything else. So a few little things in there, but it's also about self-care. I think if I could kind of like wrap it up in one big thing, is all about self-care for yourself. Yeah, being good to yourself, loving yourself, and kind of just that way you can be passionate about what you're doing, and you can help more people when you're able to do that. So that's kind of my the last little nuggets I've kind of found in my life to do. It's hard to remember. I wish I actually would put that into my calendar. And this is a great inspirational thing for me to do today, is actually put days off into my calendar, because as entrepreneurs, hours turn into days, which turn into weeks. And then you look back and, time flies so fast. So I think that's one of the big things is scheduling. I'm going to start scheduling my time off so that I can kind of recharge and things like that.
That's great advice. That is great advice, Brady. And that's something Juliet and I do, that when we plan each quarter, the first thing we do is put in the calendar our time off. Mm-hmm. And then everything else gets booked around it. But it took us many, many years to get to that point where we actually started practicing what we preach. So what about you, Juliet? You have any final words for our audience?
I guess the only one is Brady has also very generously offered for our audience a discount code for the handbook, I believe.
Yep.
And Steve, you will have that listed in the show notes, but just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our audience for sharing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I will have a link in the show notes, and I will also put the code in the show notes as well. And the joys of doing a podcast from your home.
With a dog.
Yes, we have a dog who apparently someone is ringing our front doorbell, and he is not happy about it. So this is just, I love doing podcasts from the home office. And that brings us to this episode's words of wisdom. And this is one that, it's fairly well known, but I think we could all benefit from either saying it or reading it on a more regular basis. And it's from George Bernard Shaw. And the quote is, "You see things and you say why, but I dream things that never were, and I say why not."
Excellent.
And so again, thank you very much, Brady. Really appreciate it. Great job. Thank you very much, Juliet, for your support again. Great job. But most importantly, thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in, giving us a listen. We sincerely hope you found some value. And if you did, we'd love it if you subscribed. Our podcast is in all the regular places, or you can go to the website, smartmansmarterwoman.com. So thank you again. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those that you love. Bye for now.